Something happened in a quiet room last night that your soulmate never expected to hear about, and when the truth reached them, they did not react with anger, jealousy, or triumph. They simply went still. Because the turning point their ex had just faced was not the ending everyone assumed it would be. It was the moment a hidden choice was exposed, and that choice placed your name at the center of a conversation you were never meant to witness. The evening had begun without drama. Rain traced thin silver lines down the windows of a small cafe near the edge of town. The tables were nearly empty, the music was low, and the air carried the warm scent of coffee and wet pavement. Your soulmate's ex sat alone beneath a hanging lamp, turning a cold cup between both hands. Their phone rested face down beside it. For days, they had been avoiding a message. Not because the words were cruel, but because they were honest. The message had come from someone who knew the entire history, the promises that had been made, the misunderstandings that had been allowed to grow, and the quiet ways the past had continued to influence the present. It contained only one question. Are you finally ready to admit why you still keep looking backward? That question followed them everywhere. It followed them into sleepless nights. It followed them through conversations where they smiled at the right moments but heard almost nothing. It followed them whenever someone mentioned your soulmate's name. And now, beneath the dim cafe light, they could no longer pretend the answer did not exist. They picked up the phone and typed 3 words. I was afraid. But afraid of what? That was the question they could not answer quickly. At first, they told themselves they had been afraid of being forgotten. They had once occupied an important place in your soulmate's life, and losing that place felt like losing part of their own identity. Even after the relationship changed, they had held on to small signs, the occasional memory, an old photograph, a familiar song, as if those fragments proved the story was not truly over. But sitting alone that night, they recognized something deeper. They had not been afraid of losing your soulmate. They had been afraid that your soulmate might become happier without them. The realization landed heavily. Outside, headlights moved across the rain-dark street, disappearing as quickly as they came. Inside, the ex lowered their eyes and remembered the first time they heard about you. Your name had not been spoken with excitement. It had been spoken softly, almost carefully, as though your soulmate was protecting something new from the noise of the world. That softness had unsettled them. Because your soulmate had once spoken that way about dreams, but rarely about people. At the time, the ex had dismissed it. They convinced themselves you were only a passing connection, someone arriving during a vulnerable season. They expected your soulmate to grow distant, lose interest, or retreat into old patterns. Instead, something unexpected happened. Your soulmate began changing. Not dramatically. Not in ways that could be displayed or explained. The changes appeared in small decisions. They became more honest about what they needed. They stopped apologizing for setting boundaries. They no longer entertained conversations that left them feeling empty. They began choosing peace over familiarity, even when familiarity called them by name. And each time your soulmate moved forward, the ex felt a door closing. Yet what they misunderstood was that the door was not being closed against them. It was being closed against an old version of your soulmate, the version who confused emotional struggle with devotion and believed love had to be difficult to be meaningful. You did not force that transformation. You simply became part of the reason they believed another kind of connection might be possible. That truth had been difficult for the ex to accept. They had spent months wondering what you possessed that they did not. They imagined your appearance, your voice, the way you carried yourself when you entered a room. They wondered whether you were more charming, more patient, more confident, or somehow more worthy. But the turning point that night revealed something they had never considered. Your soulmate was not drawn to you because you defeated anyone. They were drawn to you because they felt less defeated when they imagined a life beside you. The ex closed their eyes as that understanding settled over them. For the first time, they stopped seeing you as a rival in a story that had already ended. They saw you as a human being who had unknowingly walked into the middle of unfinished emotions. And that was when the cafe door opened. A mutual friend stepped inside, shaking rain from their coat. This was the person who had sent the message, the one who had asked the question the ex had avoided. They crossed the room, sat in the opposite chair, and waited without speaking. For several seconds, neither of them moved. Then the ex pushed the untouched coffee aside. "You were right," they whispered. The friend did not ask what they meant. They already knew. The ex stared through the window, watching raindrops gather and fall. "I kept telling myself that I wanted closure. But every time closure came near, I found a reason to reopen the past." Why? Because if they truly moved on, I would have to admit the relationship ended long before I accepted it. The friend leaned back, studying their face. And what changed tonight? The answer did not come immediately. The ex picked up the phone and opened an old conversation with your soulmate. They scrolled past apologies, promises, arguments, and half-finished attempts to reconnect. Then they stopped at one message, one they had read many times but never fully understood. Your soulmate had written, "I don't hate what we were. I just can't keep living as though the past is waiting for us to repair it." The ex placed the phone on the table. "What changed," they said, "is that I finally believed them." The friend's expression softened, but another question remained. "What are you going to do now?" The ex looked down at their hands. That was the unexpected turning point. Until that moment, everyone assumed they would try one more time to regain your soulmate's attention. They had opportunities. They knew which memories would stir emotion, which words could create doubt, and which unfinished conversations might make your soulmate hesitate. But that night, they chose something no one expected. They decided to stop interfering. Not as a performance. Not to appear noble. Not because they had suddenly become untouched by the loss. They were still grieving. Part of them still wished the story had gone differently. Yet another part had finally understood that holding onto someone was not the same as loving them. Sometimes love revealed itself through pursuit. And sometimes it revealed itself through release. The ex unlocked the phone and opened a draft they had written several days earlier. It was a long message meant for your soulmate, filled with memories, explanations, and carefully chosen words designed to reopen an emotional door. They read it once. Then deleted every line. The blank screen seemed to glow in the dimness. The friend watched without interruption. After a moment, the ex began writing again, but this time the message was brief. I understand now. I'm sorry for the ways I made moving forward harder. You don't owe me another explanation. I hope you choose what gives you peace. Their thumb hovered over the send button. They did not press it. Why are you waiting? The friend asked. Because I need to know whether sending this would free them, the ex replied, or whether it would only make me feel forgiven. That distinction changed the entire room. For the first time, their decision was not centered on their own discomfort. They were thinking about the emotional weight their message might place on your soulmate. Would it offer closure, or would it summon memories your soulmate had worked hard to quiet? The ex turned the phone face down again. I'm not sending it tonight. The friend nodded. Then what will you do? I'll give them what I should have given them a long time ago. What's that? Silence without punishment. The rain continued tapping the glass, but the emotional storm had shifted. Nothing outwardly spectacular occurred. No one raised their voice. No dramatic confrontation unfolded. Yet something important had ended in that cafe. The ex stopped waiting for your soulmate to return. And without knowing it, your soulmate felt the shift. Later that same evening, your soulmate sat at home near an open window. The rain had reached their neighborhood too, carrying a cool scent through the room. They had been trying to focus on something ordinary, but a strange restlessness moved through them. They checked their phone more than once, expecting a message they could not name. Nothing appeared. Instead of anxiety, they felt an unfamiliar calm. For so long, part of your soulmate had remained emotionally prepared for the past to interrupt the present. Even during peaceful moments, they expected an old conversation to return, a misunderstanding to resurface, or a familiar name to appear on the screen. But that night, the silence felt different. It did not feel like distance. It felt like permission. Your soulmate stood and walked toward the window. Across the street, rainwater shimmered beneath a street lamp. They remembered all the times they had hesitated to move closer to you because they feared bringing unresolved history into something meaningful. They had not wanted you to become responsible for wounds you did not create. They had not wanted to promise you a future while part of their heart was still defending itself from the past. But what your soulmate did not yet know was that the past had just loosened its grip. And when that grip weakened, a truth they had kept carefully hidden rose to the surface. They missed you. Not only your presence. Not only the sound of your voice or the comfort of your attention. They missed the person they became when they allowed themselves to be honest with you. With you, they did not feel pressured to perform certainty. They could admit confusion. They could speak about dreams they usually kept private. They could sit in silence without fearing that silence meant abandonment. You had seen both their strength and their hesitation, and somehow your understanding had never made them feel small. That frightened them more than they had admitted. Because being understood created something real to lose. Your soulmate reached for their phone and opened your conversation. Their last exchange appeared on the screen. It was not an argument. It was something more painful, a polite distance that neither of you truly wanted. Your final message had been kind, but restrained. You had given them space because you believed that was what they needed. They had accepted the space because they believed protecting you meant staying away until they could offer clarity. But neither of you had asked the question hiding beneath the silence. What if the distance was no longer protecting anyone? Your soulmate began typing. They wrote your name first. Then stopped. Their heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the weight of everything that might follow. They knew a simple message could reopen hope. They also knew it could expose feelings they had spent months trying to control. So they erased your name and set the phone down. But the moment had already changed them. Across town, the ex remained in the cafe with the unsent message still hidden in their phone. Your soulmate stood at the window with an unwritten confession resting in their chest. And you, unaware of either scene, may have felt something shift inside you to a sudden memory, a strange calm, or the sense that a chapter you thought was frozen had quietly begun to move again. Yet the greatest revelation had not happened in the cafe. It came the following morning. The mutual friend received a message from the ex shortly after sunrise. The words were unexpected enough that they read them twice. I found something your soulmate left behind. I think it belongs with the person they truly wrote it for. Attached beneath the message was a photograph of a folded page. The paper was worn at the edges, and your name was written across the front in your soulmate's handwriting. The friend stared at the image, unsure whether to respond. Because everyone had believed the ex was the only person who knew that letter existed. But the letter had never been intended for them. It had been written for you. And the final line inside it contained a confession your soulmate had never found the courage to send. The morning light spread gently across the room as the folded letter finally found its way into the hands it had always been meant for. No dramatic music played. No crowd gathered. The world outside continued as it always had, unaware that one quiet moment was about to change 3 lives forever. Your hands trembled slightly as you unfolded the worn page. The familiar handwriting carried the weight of thoughts that had waited far too long to be spoken. The first sentence stole your breath. If this letter ever reaches you, it means I finally found the courage to stop running from the truth. You paused, allowing every word to settle into your heart. The letter did not promise perfection. It did not erase the misunderstandings that had stretched across months of silence. It did not pretend that healing could happen overnight. Instead, it offered something far more valuable. Honesty. Your soulmate admitted they had spent too much time allowing old memories, unanswered questions, and unresolved chapters to shape decisions that should have been guided by hope instead of fear. They confessed that every time they wanted to move closer to you, they first looked over their shoulder at yesterday. They apologized not because someone demanded it, but because their own heart had finally become ready to speak without hiding. Then came the sentence that neither time nor distance could weaken. I realized the safest place I've ever imagined wasn't a location. It was every future that included you. Tears gathered in your eyes not because the words were perfect, but because they were real. For the first time, there was no confusion hiding between the lines. No mixed signals. No unfinished conversations. Only truth. Across town, your soulmate waited with quiet uncertainty. They had no idea whether the letter had been found. They expected nothing in return. The decision had already been made inside their heart. They would no longer allow fear to speak louder than love. At nearly the same moment, the ex looked out across the morning sky and felt something they had not experienced in a very long time. Peace. Not because the past had been erased. Not because every regret had disappeared. But because they had finally stopped carrying a story that no longer belonged to them. Instead of trying to rewrite someone else's future, they chose to begin writing their own. That unexpected turning point became the beginning of their healing rather than the ending they once feared. The mutual friend smiled quietly after watching every piece finally settle into place. Sometimes life does not need revenge. Sometimes it simply needs honesty. Sometimes the greatest victory is not watching someone lose. It is watching everyone become free. As the sun climbed higher, your soulmate took one final deep breath, picked up the phone, and typed the words they had been carrying for far too long. Whenever you're ready, I'd love to begin again, not by repeating the past, but by building something new together. This time, there was no hesitation. The message was sent. Far away, your phone gently lit up. You looked down. You smiled. Not because every question had already been answered, but because hope had finally become stronger than fear. And sometimes that single moment is where the most beautiful stories truly begin. As this story comes to a close, remember that every ending creates space for a new beginning. Healing often arrives quietly, forgiveness grows one choice at a time, and hope has a remarkable way of finding those who keep their hearts open. May your days be filled with wisdom, your heart with peace, and your path with meaningful connections. May you always find the strength to release what no longer serves you and the courage to embrace the opportunities waiting ahead. If this fictional inspirational story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who may need a little hope today. Until our next story, take care of yourself, keep believing in brighter tomorrows, and remember that every new sunrise carries the possibility of a beautiful new chapter.